Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Surfing the Sea with, of course, MLP Dota and John X Fire. John, welcome back, sir. How the hell are you feeling after the first week of the DPSEA for SEA?
Yeah, it was quite the week. Just one best of threes per team so far that have been played. Results, it doesn't look too surprising. I think there are a couple of teams that I didn't think would perform that way, and for the most part, it keeps in that Southeast Asian tradition of 2-0s when it comes to best of three. So not seeing any more games series going to the full 3 games, except for the last one in this week, which is sort of disappointing, but kind of plays into how Southeast Asia is like. We love our snowballs. Once you get that momentum going, you tend to just run with it in the region.
Absolutely. Now, John, I should kind of point out before we go any further, we are changing the format of this show just a little bit because we realize that doing 5 videos a week might actually kill John because he's editing everything. And as well as that, we did want to create other content such as, podcasts and interviews and things like that with the players from the region. So we decided we'd do a one kind of video a week for this, more of a weekly recap and a bit more of a sports show where me and John, we just talk it out, see what's going on in the region, see what happened during the week, and hopefully have a bit of fun. Expect more content to be announced very, very soon for SEA. Still with that, John, we should go into the games that happened with this week. Now, we did make those videos off the first 2 series, right? So we already have a video based on Fnatic and T1 and Boom vs Neon, but I think we can still kind of gloss over it just for the sake of uniformity here. Fnatic vs T1, we've already analyzed it, but would you say you were surprised that Fnatic 2-0 T1 to start off the week?
I would say a 2-0 start is a bit surprising. I expected a bit more from T1. Jackie was not up to that point that a lot of people expected, but I think we talked about this in our first episode as well. In fact, T1 and Fnatic, in fact, almost every single team in Southeast Asia went through those roster changes, and T1's the one that felt the most awkward. On paper, they are like the most solid because it's Geek Fan plus 1. You take out Raven, you replace him with Jackie, but a shift in one player like that in a fairly short time span can be difficult to adjust to. I think Jackie has not been able to get the space that we were used to seeing him get on MG Trust. I recall a lot of games in MG Trust where the rest of the team would just literally throw their bodies out for Jackie to be on top, and he would just outfarm everyone else. That kind of space isn't being achieved by T1 as it is now. I think they're going to have to reconsider what they want out of Jackie to get that happening. Of course, I think a couple of things were coming out of that draft as well, and we weren't seeing Cuckoo at his most influential. I feel like Cuckoo's at his best with stuff like the Legion Commander, stuff like his Centaur combinations as well is something we used to see, and it just wasn't quite there for T1 in that first series.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat here for T1. I was very shocked to see a 2-0 from Fnatic, and I was watching that series while it was live, and I mean, props to Fnatic. Obviously, they played the series out very, very well. Mind you, the games were pretty close, I would argue. Fnatic did seem to be in the lead the whole time, but T1 were putting up a fight, but it does appear to be a matter of just getting the coordination right and getting a game plan right with T1, and you already kind of brushed over this, but Jackie, in Motivate Trust, he had 4 people protecting him at all times, making space, giving him every piece of farm they possibly could, and obviously in T1 now that's going to be very different, as you do have the Geek Fan plus 1 lineup, and he is the plus 1. John, I'm not sure if there's going to be any kind of communication issues with T1, as Jackie is from Laos, right? So I'm not sure how good his English is because I haven't spoken to him personally. I've seen him type in the Twitch chat and it was pretty good there. So perhaps it's not really that big of a problem, but I don't know. I do agree with you that I think they need to have a set strategy in place before they get into their game. And of course with Jackie, like we talked about, it's a 4 Protect 1 that he likes to play. Apart from that, if you're not going to run the 4 Protect 1, I guess he's the one who has to really adjust to this new playstyle with T1. And maybe you could make the argument that maybe the meta's changed enough for Jackie to just not feel comfortable on these current position 1s, as we did see him play the Wraith King and the Naga. I'd say the Naga is completely out of meta right now, so I'm not sure what that pick was all about in the second game. First game, the Wraith King, personally, John, I can't remember seeing Jackie play Wraith King back when we were casting SEA. So I don't know if it's a meta thing. I don't know if it's a coordination or a team play thing or a game plan thing. Hopefully, we'll get to talk to Jackie someday and find out. But at least for this series, Fnatic, they looked pretty good. I think there's obviously some creases that could be ironed out. But overall, Fnatic look like they're here to play. And you got to give them props, John. They did a great job. And honestly, if I was to pick a team, I would have said T1 before the series started. So, yeah, again, congrats to Fnatic on that first series win.
Yeah, just really clean. Now, of course, after that one, after Fnatic T1, we also kind of talked about Boom versus Neon. Another 2-0 win for Neon this time around. And it's kind of the same issue, right? Like, Boom, -1, +1. They took out Dreamwhistle. They added in Drew. You think Drew is more like a side grade? I think it's straight up a downgrade compared to Dreamwhistle. Like,
no. Hold on.
Yeah,
Don't you dare. You said it was a side grade, and I said it was a downgrade. Don't take credit for my point.
All right, fair enough. But yeah, it's the debut of Boom, and it's a more awkward spot for Boom because they took BTS Pro Series 4 off. So they didn't have that warm-up tournament beforehand. They weren't even playing smaller tournaments as well, like you saw Neon playing in, say, Moon Studio and some such. Boom was just out of it for a good month. And they were burning through the last year. We did see them, nail second back-to-back, which can really take a toll on your morale. And that's one factor that Boom has unique compared to everyone else. They were so close to clinching some of the big tournaments in the region and didn't close out. This series, it's, again, a bit of that adjustment period. The rest of the 4 roster is still looking solid. Game 1, I mean, safe lane Bloodseeker for Drew. That just didn't feel like the pick there, you know?
It's a very confident pick, isn't it, John, that position 1 Bloodseeker? It's kind of saying, hey, we work really well as a team. We're confident we can just run at you through the mid game. We're going to pick this POS 1 Bloodseeker and we're going to destroy you. Obviously, that did not work out for Boom Esports in Game 1. Nor did Game 2 work out for them, but in that case, they went to a more standard Lifestealer pickup for their position 1. Now, I want to say, John, before this series started, for once my prediction was correct. I did predict Neon would win out this series, but I didn't think it'd be a 2-0. I thought for sure we'd be looking at a 2-1. Boom should have been able to pick up one of the games. And there's some interesting points to be made about this game, and again, we've already analyzed it, so if you want some deeper analysis, check the previous video with Surfing the Sea. But apart from that, I believe it was Alchemy Elevated. I was watching his stream on the DPSEA, John. And he was reviewing this game, and he specifically asked the question that I've been asking for the past week, which is Clairvoyance still drafting for Boom Esports? Because it does look very different. These drafts don't look the same. The way Boom's playing does not look the same. And I understand having a new position 1 can change things a lot. Of course, there's been a new patch. They had a long break, like you mentioned. But do they still have Coach Clairvoyance? That's really my question right now, because it doesn't really look like they do. If they do, I'm sure he's trying to mix things up or something like that. For now, though, that question is really hot in my mind. It looks like he's been missing. He's been out of action or something. These drafts do look very different for Boom, very experimental. And you've got to give props to Neon, John. They're a very strong team and they're always underestimated. Every single time you watch a series, people are always shocked that Neon come out on top, especially up against the top 4 in quotations between TNC, Boom, Fnatic, and T1. But Neon is that team that it's a dark horse. They'll come out of nowhere. You won't expect it. You won't expect them to be that hyper aggressive in the series you're going to have against them, and they'll just steamroll over you with the craziest draft you've ever seen. So props to Neon. But my question still stands. Where the hell's Clairvoyance? Is he still coaching Boom?
I don't know. Again, the last time I checked Twitter, right, like I checked Clairvoyance's Twitter, he mentioned his contract was up in the air, but there was no update afterwards. So, and his bio still says coach of Boom Esports. So maybe we should ask the fella himself. Maybe sometime when he's free, we could drag him down for a bit of conversation. But what's going on with Boom? I still have the question in mind, like, what exactly was the swap of Dreamwhistle all about? Because that was a big one, on top of the whole thing with the coaching as well. So maybe he can shed some light on it down the time. I would love that.
Well, we are planning on doing a podcast where we get to interview people, coaches, talent, and players. So that is one of the coaches I kind of had in mind to bring on to have an interview with, John, because I thought there's a lot of questions revolving around Boom that we kind of never get answered. It seems like Boom is a much quieter organization when you kind of compare them to, say, TNC or Fnatic. So it is something I want to kind of have a discussion with him about, see what's going on and where they're headed. And, it's still the first week. But we were talking about this before we started the show today. Every week's really important, right? You're basically in a 6-week group stage and then off to the major. So it can be pretty tough to kind of drop any games right now. And I don't think Boom's going to necessarily be happy that they've dropped that first series of the week, 0-2 to Neon. That's honestly something I didn't expect. I honestly thought it was going to be at least a 2-1.
Yeah, it's that close matchup, and we've seen Boom and Neon go against each other. It tends to be really close, but
yeah,
not the result I think either side was expecting. Of course, Neon's going to be very happy about it. It kind of builds off as well because Neon did have 2 series this week. Of course, the latest one was Neon as well, but that's way down the line. Before that, we did have one day with 1 series, 496 versus Vice, a 2-0 for 496. I said 496 fixed their roster issues by having Hustler in instead of revolving around throwing that BB, mid and safe then off, red mid and safe then off, Bombi on 1 sometimes, because of the uncertainty with 458, who is a very solid player, but just really unfortunate that he can't really play stably right now. 496 with Hustler is just looking good. Now, a 2-0 against Vice in this manner, though, not what I'd expect. I still thought Vice could at least take a game off, maybe even take the series. For me, it was 50-50. Not making excuses for them, Mike. I did get some information from their coach, and he did show me a screenshot. They were constantly disconnecting, and it was sort of mentioned. I mean, we talked about it. They did just make new offices in Nueva Ecija, so this is not even Metro Manila. Just for context, Nueva Ecija, Palayan, where they are, because that's where the team owner is based. It's like
I thought that's where
province.
You were.
No. I'm all the way in the south in Davao. This is still like Luzon up north, but it's a province. It's a city of 50,000 people, a lot smaller compared to, say, Manila. The infrastructure might not be the best. It's a new building, so it sounds like it was really not a good connection. They did lose the series 2-0. They accept that, but the network issues, I think, might have played a part. You look at game 2. First 10 minutes, it looked really good for Vice, and then they just make these weird decisions. The response time you'd expect from Bob wasn't there. Not to take away from 496. I mean, Hustler was doing amazing. They were really hitting their marks. Bombi was just on his heroes that you'd expect him to do on his pause 5, but Vice was not playing up to par, I think.
I would agree with you on that. I mean, it was game 2. I believe you were telling me there was an earthquake that happened, correct? In the Philippines that day, which is kind of what caused the internet issues in the first place for Vice Esports. Obviously, 496, they're one of those teams, we talk about it all the time, but they're hyper aggressive, right? They're arguably the most aggressive team in the SEA DPC for upper division, and I say arguably because there's also Neon. So either one of those two are going to be those teams that they just run at you constantly, and they're not going to stop, foot on the pedal, just all the way down. Sometimes you run out of gas, sometimes you don't. But, for this time, 496, sure, it's unfortunate that Vice, suffered those disconnections, those internet issues. Obviously, as soon as 496 smell blood in the water, they're going. It's... All's fair, right? It's not 496's fault their internet's having issues on Vice's end. I do feel bad for Vice, though. I mean, you do want to kind of at least force to a game 3 after the game 1 they had, and if you do kind of go back and watch game 1, it was very one-sided. It wasn't even close. 44-14, 496's way. It looks like they just went for a Night Stalker draft with an Ursa, and they just kind of ran over the side of Vice. It was just one of those kind of very snowbally lineups that 496 is very well known for in game 1. And once they smell blood again, you just can't stop them. If they get you a couple times, the game's just over. 496 has always been one of those teams where you can't you can't give them a small net worth lead early on, I want to say, because they will abuse it very, very hard. Still, of course, game 2, like you mentioned, disconnections happened. Very, very unfortunate for Vice. They pretty much had no option, no opportunity to really force to a game 3. Like you said, first 10 minutes was looking pretty darn good for Vice, but what do you... Earthquake happens. Well, shit happens, unfortunately, for Vice, and it does fall apart. With that, John, I mean, if we're talking any kind of MVP for this series, it's a bit hard to hand one out considering the circumstances here for Vice. A bit unfortunate for them, so it's kind of hard to really give you a real set kind of MVP from 496. Were you thinking of anyone in particular? That anyone looked good to you?
I think Hung really showed up in his mid this time around. He really delivered, especially in that game number 2, I think, where he was playing. I believe the mid-wind ranger was coming out there. Really solid performance coming out. And it's a step up, especially considering before, when you talk about 496, you always talk about Bombi. It's good to see their core players stepping up to the plate now, getting the space they need, getting the plays out that they need to do. And I think Hung is definitely starting to step up in his mid role here.
No, I gotta give you, I gotta agree with you on that one, John. I mean, you look at the stats from Hung in that series. Obviously, the second game, again, you could kind of argue that it's questionable to even consider that one due to the internet issues, but his Wind Ranger 24, 3, and 28 is a pretty insane score on the mid-Wind Ranger. And the first game, which we can kind of count, is, again, another huge kill score here by Hung with the Midnight Stalker, 17, 2, and 9. So really having an amazing game. I believe all up, what is that, 41 kills?
Oh, yeah.
If I'm doing my Australian math correctly. Something like 41 kills in 2 games. Pretty insane by our mid player Hung from 496. I do agree with you though, John. Just a great player overall. And with that, we should move on to the next series that happened this week. It was going to be TNC versus Execration, and I feel like this is the one that everyone's very confused about. Now, I'm sure you've got a lot to say about Execration, John. You've been watching them very carefully as of late. I also have quite a bit to say, but I'll let you get started, right? What happened? What happened in your opinion?
Game 1, I'm not sure what TNC were trying to do with that draft, but when you let Rupido and BDZ get the heroes they want, you're asking for trouble. We saw the BDZ Rubik, we saw the Rupido Mars, Mike.
Rupido.
A mistake. That's a mistake. A very big mistake to make, giving it off. He just delivers every single time he plays that hero. And Execration is that team, again, that a lot of people will sleep on. They underestimate just how far they can go. There is some blossoming issues there for Execration. Yoef, he's actually a great kid. Like I've watched him play with Crest and a party stack. He's a really nice kid, really good kid. But there's some experience issues to still hammer in. I think for now, I mean, he delivers on his core role, but the real space makers, the real playmakers to highlight in Execration has to be BDZ and Rupido. And when you let these guys have what they want, you are asking for trouble. And I have to point it out, Mike, TNC versus Execration, another Rambulan, So it's the bloodiest one, and it's always the one. These Rambulans are the ones that are most surprising because Filipino teams are just very volatile in general.
I've got to stop you there, John. I don't know if you have the right to say the bloodiest ones this week, as we do have a series to talk about after this, which was really the bloodiest one between Neon and 496. But I do, I agree with you. These matches, the Rambulans are always very entertaining, especially for us, John. We do get ourselves very excited about the Filipino versus Filipino matchups. Still, you talked about BDZ Rupido, and I had the exact same thought process, John. I literally had nothing else to say. I mean, you gave Rupido Mars, you gave BDZ Rubik, which, if you haven't watched BDZ Rubik, it is a real pleasure to watch. I feel like the game's over after that. I can't even count the amount of times we've watched Mars Rubik on Execration with these two. Or it was another team in the previous few months before they got taken in by the Execration organization, but we've seen this many, many times from these two. They seem to be a real powerhouse in that off lane. no matter what team they're in, and it's a scary sight when you give those two away. And I'm not sure how to feel about TNC's draft this game. I know you kind of commented on it, saying it's a bit up in the air. It's a bit weird to kind of understand what they were trying to get done here.
Yeah.
I believe we have seen this before. The Tim's IO with the Armel Slark. I'm pretty sure we've seen it a couple times. It does somewhat always feel kind of flat, if I'm honest. That mid Slark plus IO. You know, with Tims, we always prefer Tims to be on a, either secondary initiator or just someone that can annoy the hell out of the other team, like his Mirana that we see just arrowing everybody all over the map over and over again. On the IO, yeah, you can make some sick plays, but it's still an IO at the end of the day. You are still kind of committed to just keeping your team alive rather than setting up for kills. And I think overall, when you're dealing with a player like Tims, and I've made this argument many times when we've casted TNC, just give him something that can do something, other than just keep the team alive. I want to see those Mirana arrows. I want to see the Earthshaker. I want to just anything with a disable. Give it to Tims. Let him start the team fights for you. Let him create chaos in the middle of these team fights. I don't feel like the IO can do the same thing.
No.
I'm not saying that Tims didn't play well, John. I'm just saying he's limited with the IO pickup.
He was. In game 2, they corrected that. They got the Mirana. But you see the confidence in Execration. Like, they get this BDZ Earth Spirit, which is also something I pointed out in that first video. He loves his Rubik, he loves his Earth Spirit, and again, it just Execration just got that momentum going. They also went back to the Medusa twice over, so you can see the confidence coming out here from Execration. They are looking on top, and this is the one kryptonite for TNC. When it comes to Filipino teams, they almost always, on paper, they do dominate Filipino teams, but every now and again, in these pivotal moments, you see TNC maybe lose their foothold, and these teams just know how to abuse that very well.
You did mention this to me as well, and you can kind of see it in the gameplay footage when we do see Execration versus TNC in game number 2. They did seem a little bit frustrated, or just maybe a little bit sloppy. Now, mind you, of course, like any other team, the season's just started, right? There's plenty of time to get some wins under your belt. I'm sure TNC is going to go back, spend the next few days just kind of getting to practice with each other and try to figure out what to do for next week. Obviously, a very bad start for them with a 0-2, and this is the team where I thought they would guaranteed be at least top 2. And again, my predictions are a bit off here, John, because in the first week they have not performed too well. Big props to Execration, though. I think you've already pointed it out, but the BDZ Earth Spirit, another thing you don't really want to give BDZ if you can avoid it. He's one of those players where he's got a hero pool of like 3 heroes that you just can't let him have. The third one I can't remember right now, but the Rubik Earth Spirit, you do not let him touch, because he will just ruin the game for you every single time. And speaking of BDZ, John, straight off the bat, do you want to give the MVP to BDZ, or do you want to give it to Rupido here? I feel like it's going to be one of those two.
For me, it's almost always BDZ. He's one of those pause 4 players that I always have to hand it to, mainly because he just makes so many plays happen. He wins his off lane, he stabilizes or wins out the mid as well. His rotations are on point, and he is a pause 4 to kind of watch out for. It's like Tim's on Mirana, BDZ on these 2 heroes. So just outperform this time. Yeah, definitely.
See, I'm very torn here because I'm obviously with BDZ. I'm a big fan. I've watched him enough now that I'm very, very excited with this man, and he tends to play the heroes that I specifically really enjoy playing too, John. So it kind of maybe a bit of caster bias here, but I'm kind of leaning towards their offlaner, Mr. Rupido. I mean, you look at his scores, John. 13, 3, and 16 on the Darkseer. Look at the first game as well on that Mars. He had a huge scoreline of 14, 3, and 22. I know it's the ragtag kind of duo of these two, though. I feel like if one of them's missing, the other's just not going to perform the same way. So I'm going to leave my MVP up in the air. It's either one of those two. I think we'll just go with yours, which was BDZ. I was definitely leading towards the position 3 this time. But again, if you've got both of them there, they're going to perform. Okay. That's what I can guarantee from Execration. Moving on, John. Last series. Now, this is the bloodiest and one of the most exciting series of the week. Neon versus 496.
Oh, man.
What else to say than talking about the start of Game 3? I mean, Game 3... An ultra kill out
God.
for our Coddle Skem, I believe it was.
Oh, God.
He just spamming out the Illuminate over and over again. I believe he got like 3 or 4 Illuminates.
Yep.
Just in that one team fight. A full-scale 5v5. This is SEA Dota at its pinnacle, John. This is what SEA is. Just, the horn hasn't gone off. Nobody's got any vision. There's no wards down, nothing, no creeps. Level 1, run at each other. 5v5, man up. That's what I love to see in SEA, and that's what we saw between these two in at least Game 3. And I guess while we're talking about that Game 3, John, I'd argue that's why 496 lost the game so heavily in that third game. So if you're going to give an ultra kill away to the position 5 Keeper of the Light, who can then just buy a Medallion of Courage, which he did, by the way, at a record time, on top of that, it's... I don't know what you expected. You can't give that much of a net worth lead over to the other team before the game's even started. It's too hard to come back from, especially when you're versing Neon, who again are going to be hyper aggressive with that tiny net worth lead they did grab.
Yeah, and this is something we've seen 496 do a lot of. To be fair to them, like, they love this early aggression, as you mentioned. Neon does as well, but they get punished really hard. I think the level 2 timing for Skem was really quick as well. Like, the moment they went into lane, he had level 2. So you're talking about a full level advantage already for your Pos 5, who can then start harassing you with his slow and with the Illuminate. Not a fun lane for 496 to stabilize afterwards. They didn't manage to get these comfort picks as well in their draft. We didn't see the Phoenix. We didn't see the Oracle coming through for Bombi, perhaps being banned out by Neon as well. So they didn't have those kind of saving supports that you're used to seeing for Bombi here. They didn't have the Wind Ranger pocket pick. That's like a double flux for them as support and mid. And I think their draft was also one of the sticking points here as well. Game 1 worked out really fine. That was a dragged out game though. They were playing with that OD we've been seeing pop back in. But afterwards, they did have the Wind Ranger in Game 2. It just didn't feel... It wasn't enough. I think Neon did manage to get a grip there. And this is the Neon that is slowly evolving. Like, they had that roster shakeup with Natsumi, except they've probably had more cooking time than every other team. About as much as T1, but much more successful so far with this adjustment. We did see them falter in BTS Pro Series 4, but you're really seeing Skem be comfy now on his support role, and you're really seeing Playhard start to go into the core role really well in the offlane.
I gotta give it to you, John. I mean, you saw me talk about this. Now, when I saw Natsumi was joining the team, I straight up said that's a bad decision. You know, not publicly, but in private, I was like, I don't know about this. I feel like Neon was good the way they were. I didn't feel like they needed any changes. I personally felt like they just needed to slow down and kind of give themselves a bit more time to just practice. You know, they were doing many tournaments at once. They were very overwhelmed, I feel like, with all the games they were playing at that time. They made the decision to get Natsumi, and props to them. A very smart decision, apparently, John. The results are speaking for themselves right now for Neon Esports, and I do have to give props to Natsumi. His scoreline in every game was kind of amazing. That third game, by the way, for Natsumi, 23 and 19 on the Ember. The safe lane Ember that was. Now, mind you, he was laning with the Keeper of the Light, who literally had a Medallion of Courage at 0 minutes. So, you know, I'd say he had a slight advantage there, being able to get that minus armor going on the enemy. But, you know, still props to him. That was only Game 3 that he performed. He had that kind of performance. Of course, Game 2, 11-2 and 11 on the Troll Warlord. Another great performance from him. And in the first game, which is the only game that Neon actually ended up dropping here up against 496, I want to put this more down to draft. Natsumi in particular still did have a pretty decent scoreline of 8, 9, and 15. But I personally don't really like seeing the Troll Warlord into the Ursa. I do think that is a very kind of... It's a weird matchup. Because you've got two position ones that just want a man fight, right? They want to get close and hit each other. But you've got Battle Trance on Troll, and you've got the Enrage on Ursa. So both have the same kind of ultimate, where they're going to survive. It's a survivability thing with these ultis, right? But the problem is the Ursa's still stacking up Fury swipes the whole time. You know, you're not really purging those off as time goes on. I feel like that matchup can kind of go either way, but it did seem like 496, on top of having the Ursa and the OD to Astral the Troll every time he just battle trances, it's just going to make it impossible to get anything done. So props to 496 for that game 1, winning that out up against Neon. I do think that was just more of an outdraft there from 496 to pull off game 1. And game 2 and 3, I mean, they were very dominant victories by Neon, I would say. Kind of your standard Neon versus 496 game where they run at each other, and you know, it's a very high risk kind of game where it's like whoever wins these early team fights is probably just going to win the game altogether. But Neon do come out on top, and I'm really happy to see these guys at the top of the leaderboard right now, John. I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of Neon Esports. Right now, sitting at the top with 2-0 in terms of score for this round robin group stage. They're looking very good.
That they are. And they're one of the only teams, of course, to play twice in a week. Most teams only play one best of 3. 496, because they lost that series, are tied down 1-1, right around the middle position. But Neon off to a great start after the first week. Of course, they do have a lot more games, but it's a weird back and forth. Like, there's a lot more games to play, but every single game counts so much that going 2-0 in week 1 is not anything to scoff at. A really good start for Neon, and I think above what a lot of people expected, especially if they weren't paying attention to Southeast Asia. And in context as well, look at TNC, bottom right now because they did go 0-1. So, you know, these groups are just strange to start off with.
Of course, in the second week, I think is when things are going to get quite heated up, and we should see the leaderboard kind of, or the ladder just kind of equalizing out a bit, I would argue. But we'll talk about next week's matchups in just a few minutes, John. We've got a couple things to go through now. This is the fun part, and I'd like anyone watching, feel free to comment and tell us what your picks were for these are the questions, or rather the, I don't want to say awards, but the categories that we have right here that we want to go through. So feel free to comment, let us know what you think. But John, your biggest upset/surprise for the week?
Upset/surprise has got to be Execration TNC. I think a lot of people will probably take that point as well. Like, TNC's always been stronger against Filipino teams. Sometimes you see an upset, but to go 0-2 up against Execration, it is a surprise that I think TNC might not have expected. Ban out those 2 picks, guys. Ban out the Rubik and the Mars. You don't want to give them to BDZ and Rupido. TNC looks like they just caught off guard by that.
Absolutely, they definitely did, John. With that, I don't want to copy you, right? I was going to actually say the exact same thing, but because you've already said it, I'm going to say Fnatic versus T1, because I was very, very shocked when I saw that T1 didn't at least pick up a game. Quite frankly, I thought they were going to win out that series, so I was pretty shocked. Yeah, maybe I was a bit more shocked about TNC losing 0-2, but like I said, John, I'm not a copycat. I've got to be different and unique too. So there you go. Best series of the week, John. What was your pick for the week? What do people need to go back and watch if they didn't watch it?
They've got to see Neon versus 496. If not, if anything else, you know, if you really don't have the time, at least watch the first 10 minutes of Neon versus 496 Game 3. There is no reason not to see the beauty of a Kotal being ignored and allowed to do what he did there. Just brutal.
SEA Dota, John. SEA Dota. If you want to see the pinnacle of Southeast Asian Dota, go onto YouTube or go onto Twitch, look for highlights, just type in Neon vs 496, game number 3, and you will see the pinnacle of what is Southeast Asian Dota. I would agree with you as well, John. That was my pick, and I suppose I'll have to play the copycat this time around. Standings for the week, I guess we can quickly just kind of breeze over them, as everyone probably has them already, you know, on Liquipedia. It's quite accessible. If you don't know where to find it, just go to liquipedia.net. But Neon, we talked about, John, they are sitting at the top. They have had 2 series, unlike every other team, who have only had 1 apart from 496. So 496, Neon, the ones who have had 2 series this week. Neon sitting at the top, followed by Execration in second place spot. Fnatic is tied with Execration right now. And then you've got 496 in 4th place. Boom Esports sitting in 5th, and their 5th place is just tied with all four teams that have been left over. So Boom, T1, TNC, and Vice Esports all tied up for that 5th place. And ironically enough, John, 3 of the top 4 teams in SEA last year are now sitting at 5th place. They're in last place, tied together. I would have never guessed this to be the start of the DPSEA week for SEA, I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's topsy-turvy, but there are only so many games in week 1. It's just so... It's very condensed, so there's still a lot more, but they've got to kick up the pace. There are only 6 weeks as well, so, it's that weird back and forth. It's short, but it's also stretched out. So, I know, the tension rides for like a month and a half.
It is very, very short. And it's going to fly by, really, John. I mean, the whole first week's gone. It feels like we just kind of blinked and it just zoomed past us. It's very, very weird stuff. But there you go. So that's the standings and the next week's schedule. We should go over this as well because this should be a very, very entertaining week. First series, John, Vice Esports versus TNC Predator. So you pointed out Vice had some internet issues. Hopefully that is resolved, but we haven't really gotten word on whether Vice has managed to fix those up for the lead up to TNC versus Vice. But hopefully they do, and I'm sure maybe we'll get an update later on. Execration versus Fnatic is on the same day after Vice versus TNC. Another pretty kind of hype matchup, just judging on how Execration performed up against TNC, and knowing that TNC and Fnatic have a very kind of similar play style. I'm curious to see whether Execration can kind of repeat the same performance that they have up against Fnatic that they did up against TNC this week, John.
Yeah, I think it all hangs again if BDZ and Rupido can get that really fast game, or at least the heroes they want, and if Yoa can just stay away and farm. I think Fnatic, after seeing that first series of Execration, should be aware of how that happens. Historically, of course, Fnatic has sort of beat out Execration in the past year. So, favoring Fnatic, but you can never write off Execration, as I love to remind people, never write off these lower teams. Southeast Asia is just way too volatile.
With that, of course, we go on to the next day, John. 496 versus Boom Esports should be a pretty interesting matchup. I think Boom really needs to get their stuff together here, because 496... we know them. I've said this about 20 times this one video, John, but they're hyper aggressive. They're not going to give you breathing room if they get a good lead going. And I think Boom will become quite suffocated if 496 does find that early net worth lead in this series. So I'm very interested in that one. Of course, moving on 2 days later, you have TNC again. And we do have a Rambulan for this one, John. TNC versus Neon Esports. This one is probably going to be my most hype matchup to watch, I want to say. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And on the same day, you could argue this matchup even more hype. 496 versus T1 straight after that. That's going to be a very exciting day of SEA Dota.
It definitely will be. We talked about 496 versus Among Us before, the old Cuckoo stack with Whitemon as well during that weird interim period. And Cuckoo always said, like, teams like 496 and MG Trust, but 496 in particular, right, is one of those teams they don't like playing against, mainly because it's so... They just really just brig it out. I mean, we saw it in week 1. We know how they perform. They've solidified themselves with Hustler in. But, I mean, if a team can draft techies, you're always just worried about these kind of pocket picks, especially for Bombi. Yeah.
It terrifies me, John. I mean, I remember we used to cast 496, and I would secretly be sitting in the back praying, just behind my camera, just please don't choose the techies. Please, I'm hungry. I want to go to bed. The wife's waiting. Please just don't choose the techies. And long behold, we'd have a techies pop up every time. And I mean, in all fairness to 496, though, those games don't actually last very long. Bombi does tend to play a very aggressive style techies, so I gotta give him props. He's probably one of the more entertaining techies to watch, if I've seen any. And John, with that is pretty much wrapped up, but I want to be a bit cheeky here with you, sir. I just thought of something. I think we should add to the show. We should add our predictions for the week.
Yeah. Because
I think that would be fun. And we can have a bit of banter next week, assuming, who gets the better score. So, let's get started here. Vice Esports versus TNC, your pick.
I love Vice. Coach CTY is a really nice guy. TNC has had their number for a very long time, though. I would peg this. Ooh, I'd say this is a 0-2 for TNC. I want to say a 2-1 for TNC, but I think Vice, they're good, but TNC is, it's that team that has your number, and I just favor TNC on paper, so I'd say 0-2.
For the record, John, we aren't counting scores though. It's just about which team wins. But I appreciate your explanation. I do kind of agree with you though with TNC versus Vice. I like Vice. I just don't think they're at the level of TNC. And I do agree with your score that it probably will be a 2-0 for TNC. So I guess we both start off with the same prediction here, the obvious one for TNC. Moving on, this one's going to be a lot more complicated though. Execration versus Fnatic, Jonathan. Which one looks better to you this week?
Better this week. Ooh, I'd say if Execration keeps that momentum against TNC, carried over for Fnatic, I can see them doing the same thing. I think they're the same holds in Fnatic that they've sort of been struggling with, or role swap outs. DJ and Jabs shifting on 4 and 5 is still something that sort of confuses me, mainly because they're trying this new iteration out. I think Execration have a lot more leeway, a lot more freedom to kind of draft against that. I'd say they have a good chance of winning that one if Fnatic don't kind of step up to the plate even more.
So are you committing to predicting for Execration?
Yes, I would say Execration rides that train here.
And I am going to be the guy that goes the opposite way, John. I'm a Fnatic fanboy now. I'm going for Fnatic this matchup for against Execration. I do agree though. I think this is going to actually be a very close match between these two. I do not think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be a one-sided kind of stomp. I think we're going to see a very close hype kind of matchup. You're going for Execration. I'll say Fnatic wins this one out, which brings us to 496 versus Boom. John, are Boom going to get it together for this week? Or is 496 going to roll over them?
I think 496 has this. Boom.
Okay.
That extended break is hurting them. And 496, again, with Hustler on board, has looked good from the closed qualifiers. So Boom has really a lot to work on. And that break they took is not helping. They really need to find an answer here. And again, maybe we talk to Coach Clairvoyance if he is still on Boom, or if not. Like, a lot of things are just shrouded there for Boom right now.
That's the one thing that's kind of making me kind of question what to choose here, because it's like, is Clairvoyance there or not? Because if Clairvoyance is there coaching, I know he'll review the first week, he'll see what's gone wrong, and he'll move on and probably be really, really set for the second week of the DPC. If he's not there though, I'm not sure who's in charge right now for Boom. I'm going to take a risk here, John, because you've gone for 496, have you not?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to say Boom Esports takes this one out. It is a complete gamble. I don't know if Clairvoyance is there coaching right now. We're going to try and check it out. But I'm going to say Boom does win this series out, which does move us on to our final two series, and probably the most exciting ones, TNC versus Neon. Tell me who wins this one, Jonathan. I dare you.
This is so difficult to gauge. I think Neon, as it is now, is probably a bit better. I feel like TNC switching around their pause 5 has been topsy-turvy for them, whereas Neon's hammered in their supports. Scam's very comfy now in where he is. Natsumi's a really solid core. It's a very hard matchup to call, but I have a feeling Neon will probably surprise us if they're comfy. So I just have no choice. I'm just going to say Neon. Close one, Neon.
I actually 100% agree with you on that. I can't look past these guys. I've doubted them before, and they have proven me wrong every single time. So I'm not going past Neon. I think they look great right now. I do still feel a bit afraid about the POS 1 matchups between these two, because I think Gabby is still the best position 1 in SEA right now. So I'm quite intrigued to see if Natsumi's going to be able to keep up with him. That's my one problem. But again, he proved me wrong last time. I had to eat my words. So I am going for Neon this time. Let's see what happens. Final prediction, John. 496 versus T1. I think this one's pretty hard to pick. But let me know what you think.
Oh, man. I don't know. This one's so strange. I think 496 still comes out here. I mean, I love T1. Geek Fan Plus One's so good. Jackie's still a really good core. But 496 is the one that's looking the most stable coming out from week 1. Like, they might have dropped the series against Neon, but they were the only team to force a best of 3 to actually go 3 games. And Kuku himself mentioned it. 496 is just a team that they do not enjoy having to think about. So I think just even psychologically, 496 will have that edge. They might just, maybe we see the techies for Bombi. Who knows? You know?
So you're saying 496 is your prediction?
Yeah, 496.
Okay. I'm going with T1. I think T1 has their redemption arc coming in week 2, John. I think 496, they're going to try and put up a fight, but I think T1 is just going to be way ahead in this series. But only time will tell, John. Is, if you are watching and you wanted to have a bit of fun with us, put down your predictions. And don't cheat and put them down a day before we make the next video. Put them down right now so we can make sure that you haven't cheated. And yeah, we'll have a chat with you if you did predict everything right. And you never know what could happen, John. We don't have any prizes or anything like that, but we'll shout you out on the video. How about that?
Oh, yeah.
With that, John, I believe that's all our talking points for today. I got to say, a great week for SEA Dota. A lot of upsets going on. Is there anything else you wanted to add on before we kind of head out of this video?
No, I'm just going to say that look forward to something more interview-driven coming up. We've got a lot of guests we've got in mind. Should be an exciting one. That one should be more of a live format like a podcast. So, again, watch for the announcement in that one. But so far, that's it. Week 1 done. Make sure you're watching Southeast Asia. And make sure you drop by in NA as well, watching me and my cover what is now our favorite region, our next favorite region. You know, our first love, Southeast Asia, but we're in NA. We're their biggest cheerleaders, and it's a fun time there in NA.
It is. It definitely is a fun time. Come check us out if you haven't already. Otherwise, John, with that, we should head off. It's MLP Dota and John X Fire, and it's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you next week for the recap for the week for the SEA DPC. See you then.